I believed that Roger was going to win every game that we played in, no matter how much time was left in the ball game. I always believed that Roger could win the game.
I could see everybody on the field, and so I knew where to run, where to cut. In the same way, I had a feel for where people were.
Every time he throws the football, completes a pass, gains a yard, scores a touchdown, Baugh sets a world record.
You can call it magic or mystique or just plain old star quality. It is, in the end, an undefinable something that sets a select few above the rest of the NFL's legendary heroes. Whether they thrilled us or amazed us or at times even mystified us, they always, like any great entertainer, left us wanting more. Others may have held more records or won more championships, but none so possessed us as the remarkable men you're about to see. Emulated, but never equaled. They are truly the great ones. True lovers of sport respond to beauty. And beauty, as James Joyce once defined it, is the light that shines from pure form. O.J. Simpson, with his natural speed and power, expressed the purest form of his profession and became one of the most beautiful and successful runners in NFL history. If all the running backs who ever lived were wiped from memory and only O.J. Simpson remained, you could reconstruct from the perfection of his style and technique the complete runner.
In the snow and sleet of Shea Stadium, O.J. Simpson, number 32, became the first player in history to rush for more than 2,000 yards in a single season.
O.J. running left. O.J. 5 more. There it is. He did it. Yeah. I just wonder if the three of us at this moment fully realize what it has been our great privilege to watch O.J. Simpson run for 2,000 yards in one season.
The records and statistics speak well, but not as eloquently as the memories.
O.J. was the only player I ever played against in a Pro Bowl who in practice made some moves where the entire Pro Bowl squad, and this is running through plays in the Pro Bowl, stopped in awestruck. And guys said, did you see what he did? I mean, can you believe what that guy just did?
At 6'1", 215 pounds, O.J. Simpson embodied the beauty of pro football and also the beast. He was a power runner with a sprinter speed, and beyond the speed there was an instinct for the light, a sense of where the defense had become frayed and vulnerable. He knew precisely where to strike, and once in the secondary, he gave defenders the grim choice of being burned or buried.
I would rather juke a guy and try to make guys miss, but I always considered myself, I carried the ball so much that I was a pretty physical ball player also. I mean, I ran inside a lot. And normally what you would do is, early in the game, you'd pick out a DB, especially an undersized DB, and you bone him a few times, or bone him once or twice. What that would do is make it a little easier to juke him later on.
There was always muscle behind Simpson's magic. He took great pride in his stamina and strength as a runner, and even claimed some knockouts as a blocker.
I knocked out Bubba Smith. Bubba, I didn't want to tell this story. I knocked out Bubba in the game, but Bubba gave me a different story about it, but I knocked out Bubba in the game.
What happened was I was on an outside move, and I dipped inside to get the tackle off of me, and when I came back outside, I ran into his forearm. You know, I mean, it wasn't like he was trying to throw something. I mean, O.J. has never blocked nobody in his life. And I told Ted Hendricks, I said, if they run a sweep your way, hold him. I'll be 1/10 of a second behind him. Just hold him up. I want to get a shot at him.
He came back in the game, about, I guess the next series. I'm going to get you, boy. I'm going to get you. So the rest of the game, I'm running from Bubba.
The pursuit of the juice was never a trivial one, and 4 times he led the NFL in rushing. In the open field, he had an instinctive feel for danger, and unlike many of today's great runners, he wore only a minimum of protective padding.
I wore very few pads because I like to feel people grabbing at me. You can almost sense, people don't have to touch you for you to feel them. They can get close to you and you can feel them. And I needed to feel all of that so I can react to all of it. You develop a sense of yourself, a sense of total control. At that point, you think you can whip everybody on the field. I think I'm the toughest guy on the field.
He got our fastest guy, Lamar Parrish, one-on-one. And it made poor Lamar, look like he was just standing there. And Lamar even came back to the huddle kind of giggling, looked at us and, what do you guys expect?
Expectations were always high when O.J. Simpson carried the ball, and he captured the imagination of fans and players alike. He was a record breaker, a miracle maker, and a great one.
Roger Staubach was a Heisman Trophy winner from the Naval Academy, and he led the Dallas Cowboys to 2 world championships. His trademark was the Twilight Rescue Mission. He was the Rambo of the fourth quarter. 23 times he brought the Cowboys from behind to win in the final period, and 14 of those times were in the last 2 minutes or in overtime. Roger Staubach was a statue in the park type of hero, the honorable seaman in the tradition of, I have not yet begun to fight, and we have met the enemy, and he is ours.
The biggest thing about Roger was the fact that he never quit. It didn't matter how much the Cowboys were down. I remember in San Francisco, they were ahead of us 14 or 15 points, and it was 3 minutes to go or something, and they were coming by our bench and hollering obscene things at us and calling us losers, and I'll never forget, Roger pulled the game out, and a few seconds before it was over, completed a pass to Lee Folkens, and we beat them. That was the greatest comeback I'd ever seen, but he did it over and over and over throughout the years.
I believe that Roger was going to win every game that we played in, no matter how much time was left in the ball game. I always believed that Roger could win the game.
Well, the Cowboys need a miracle. Roger takes the snap, pumps it once. He's going long, down the near sideline for Drew Pearson. Pearson makes the catch at the 5, touchdown! Staubach hit Pearson on a 50-yard touchdown. Would you believe it?
The greatest thing about Roger Staubach was he was a tremendous competitor. You could not do anything with Roger. I don't care what you were doing, whether you were just taking a 40-yard sprint or you were playing one-on-one basketball, he's not going to let you beat him. I don't care what the stakes are, whether it's just for fun. That's what made him great.
Like all quarterbacks, Roger Staubach had an intense desire to win. And like all the great quarterbacks, he could communicate that desire to his receivers, often lifting them above their normal capabilities. Staubach had a certain sense of confidence in himself and in the team that caught the imagination of players and fans alike. Part of him was as sweet and as innocent as a choir boy. But the part of him that was a football player was a pure killer.
I tell you, when I went up against other teams, they were the enemy. I mean, I didn't like them, and I didn't particularly after the game go over and want to shake everybody's hand either. I mean, I wasn't a poor sport, but heck, that's, you know, those guys are the guys that you need to play again. You need to beat them again, and you can't get too close to your enemy.
I had nothing but the utmost respect for Roger Staubach. He was tough. You know, he took a lot of big hits, but he was one of those guys that always got up and dusted off the seat of his pants and went back in the huddle, never cried, never complained, never rolled around on the ground looking for a flag or anything like that.
When you're knocked down, you either can lay there and not do anything about it, or you get up and do something about it. And I used to like to bounce back also. I mean, I used to like to sometimes be down and have people stepping on me a little bit so I could, you know, kind of recoil and come back.
No player swashed so brave a buckle as the daring midshipman from the Naval Academy. He was an officer and a gentleman. He was a man you trusted instinctively, whose every word you believed, for whose reputation you would fight, and whose friend you longed to be.
Roger Staubach would be what every parent wanted their son to be. He is the epitome of a gentleman. He's the epitome of a guy who commits himself to a cause. I've got more respect for him as an athlete than anybody I've ever played with or coached.
I just don't know, of all the years I played, I just don't know of any player that I played with that disliked Roger Staubach.
There's certain guys you look at that you played against, and I'm proud to tell my kids I played against Roger Staubach.
Roger Staubach, more than an athlete, more than a celebrity, he was a hero.
Jim Brown led the NFL in rushing every year he played except one, and his career total of 126 touchdowns remains the unscaled Everest of all football records. His critics always pointed out his failure to block. All Brown can do was run, was the classic critique, to which his coach, Paul Brown, replied, "All Picasso can do is paint."
There have been many superstars in pro football, but only one Superman, Jim Brown. This Clark Kent in a three-piece suit was both locomotive and speeding bullet. His opponents, tall buildings to be leaped at a single bound, or merely shrugged aside at the line of scrimmage. Brown averaged over 102 yards a game, well over 5 yards per carry. But his most impressive statistic is that in 9 seasons, he never missed a game, despite the fact every defense was geared to stop him.
I realized I was a marked man. That works two ways. They're going to try to get me, but they're also in awe of me to a certain extent. So what I would do is I would walk up and down in front of their bench or do my exercise in front of their bench and let them get a good look at me. I would do it in slow motion, do things that were a little strange, and get myself together, but yet not give them any clues to where I was coming from. Very seldom ever talked to them.
While Brown never spoke to opponents, neither they nor his ex-teammates were reluctant to speak about him.
Jimmy Brown, to me, was the best runner that I'd ever played against. He had it all. He had great size, he had power, he had speed, But I think his biggest asset to Jimmy Brown that he was smart. He knew exactly where the defense was. He knew where his offensive players were, and he utilized all the talents that he had. And he was just unreal.
Jim Brown was a very intelligent individual. He was his own man. He was coming along at a time in professional football where you didn't speak out too much white or black. And I guess being a black ball player and being as strong as he was mentally and away from the field caused him some problems. But Jim Brown was not a bad individual. He was just a man who spoke out a little early. A Jim Brown speaking today wouldn't mean anything.
Jimmy Brown obviously took more shots than any of these running backs today because he carried the ball more, and everybody wanted to knock him down. He never wore hip pads. He never wore thigh pads. He only wore shoulder pads and a helmet, and everybody took their shots at Jimmy. He asked no quarters. He gave no quarters. He got up after every play, and I personally don't like Jimmy Brown. Don't mind saying it on camera, but I certainly had to respect him as a football player, and to play 9.5 years and only miss one half of one game with a broken wrist is remarkable.
Also remarkable was his unique combination of brute strength, sprinter speed, and incredible balance. It was Jim Brown who brought the pirouette to pro football. But this was no ballet dancer, as anyone who tried to bring him down would attest. Dallas Hall of Famer Bob Lilly witnessed many of Brown's great runs. He'll never forget the first time he tackled him.
I had pursued around to my left, and Jim Brown he ran to his right. I was on the 7-yard line, and I was in perfect position to tackle Jim Brown. When I woke up a few minutes later, my face mask was pushed on my face, and he'd scored a touchdown. And that was the first time I said, man, that guy's a lot stronger. I never thought he was that strong.
Jimmy Brown did things humanly impossible. And I watched him do it over and over and over. You watch a film of Jimmy Brown running a football. He's moving away from things that there's no way that he could see. There are instincts that other football players have never even thought of, I'm sure. He had all of that, plus he had the great determination to be the very best.
I got to say, you know, in due respect to all the football players who are playing today with their great speed and everything, to me, Jim Brown, I've been watching football for a long time. I think Jim Brown is probably the greatest football player, running back that's ever played the game.
I think in all the years that I played and in all the years that I broadcast since then, which will be 24 next year, without question, the most impressive player I've seen was Jim Brown. Just such a durable, fast, powerful, impressive human being, intimidating in his presence almost. But just by the way he warmed up, just by the way he jogged down the sideline, by the way he walked back to the huddle after you'd swear he'd never get up. And he looked like he would never be able to carry the ball again. He was just so deliberate and so slow, and the next play he'd go for a touchdown, bouncing off 5 people.
Jim Brown had a combination of speed and power that was so awesome that I really have not seen those total assets in a player since Jim Brown. To this day, still remains as the greatest ball carrier I've ever seen.
To those who played with him or against him, Jim Brown remains the greatest runner of all.
I played 9 seasons, I never missed a game, and I never laid out on the football field. Guys now accept the fact that they can be hurt slightly, run off the field, get themselves together, and come back. I might not have the greatest ability of everybody, but the one thing that stands is that when it was time to play, I was there.
The career of Johnny Unitas had a humble beginning. In fact, there just aren't many cornball stories like it anymore. Getting cut by the Steelers, a season of semi-pro ball with the Bloomfield Rams at $6 a game and getting paid in the basement of a dairy. Then the call from the Baltimore Colts, and presto, 2 back-to-back world championships in 1958 and 1959. Johnny Unitas. He came from the Sandlots to establish the standards by which all quarterbacks are judged.
The first time I ever seen Johnny Unitas, the coach came up to me and told me that I like steak. I thought he was crazy. I said, hell yeah, I like steak. He said that, you see that man over there? That's Johnny Unitas. And if you protect him, we all eat. If you don't, nobody eats.
For 16 years, John Unitas, number 19, was the meal ticket of the Baltimore Colts. He passed them to 3 world championships and won every individual honor the NFL has to offer. He once threw touchdown passes in 47 consecutive games. The only thing in sports that's comparable to that is Joe DiMaggio's 56-game hitting streak.
John Unitas could throw 3 touchdown passes or 3 interceptions. And if you sat there and insulated yourself and watched his face when he came off the field, you would not know which had happened from his expression. He was the same guy, and that was the secret of his greatness.
I get emotional over children and animals, not football games or baseball games or things that you do.
1st and 10 for Baltimore. 75 seconds to play. Packers 10, Colts 6.
Unitas was a competitor, never a showman. He would delight the fans, but only if it served his game and that of his teammates. He had no gift for gab. His talent spoke for itself.
He had a magnificent ability to put that ball up in there and drop it right down in the receiver, even though the defender would be right on top of him. He had a perfect touch for the football.
And there's nobody in the league that could throw the ball deep. I'm talking about 40, 50 yards consistently and hit the target as well as Johnny Unitas.
I think John willed things to happen. Everybody would say that, you know, he was a great Mississippi gambler and all that. Well, I think he did a lot of things that probably weren't very smart, but he got it done, and so that made him smart. You can look at quarterbacks nowadays and compare him with John as far as this is concerned. I don't think he ever ran out of bounds. Get near the sideline, he always turned his shoulder up and ran it in there. I never remember him ever dancing out of bounds.
If you were looking for a great middle linebacker, you'd put a guy with his temperament in middle linebacker, because he was a football player.
John's greatest single virtue was his unbreakable belief in himself. His ability to perform under pressure and in pain remains today the most enduring signature of his art and skill.
I remember in Chicago, my particular man that I was blocking hit him and tore all his mouth loose. He had about 17 or 20 stitches put in it. And we was trying to stop the blood on the field from bleeding. And Alex Sandusky reached down and picked up a hand of mud. He thought to pack his nose full of mud, we could stop it from bleeding, but the blood just kept coming.
The trainer came on the field, Eddie Block, he says, "You're out of here." I said, "No way." He says, "You don't know what you're doing." So I read the scoreboard to him. And he's trying to patch me up with Band-Aids and everything. And then I said, "I'll be all right." We went back in the huddle.
We had 8 seconds or 9 seconds left on the clock. And I looked at him, and I couldn't look him in the eyes. And I looked in the huddle, and he looked at me and said, "That's all right, baby." He said, "We'll get him next time." We went back to the huddle. He called a long play to Lenny Moore, and he threw a touchdown pass to Lenny over J.C. Caroline. I never forgot that, because if I had been in his shoes looking at me, I'd have took my helmet off and beat my damn brains out.
Other quarterbacks have won more championships or compiled larger statistics, but none ever fit all the requirements of his demanding position as well. In 1970, in commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the NFL, John Unitas was named by the Pro Football Hall of Fame. the greatest quarterback of all time.
In 1937, a shy young Texan named Sammy Baugh was the first draft choice of the Washington Redskins. In his rookie season, he led Washington to the NFL title, and that was the beginning of an extraordinary 16-year career. He led the NFL in passing 6 times, and no one's ever done that, and he played defense as well as offense. When he retired in 1952, an entire page in the NFL record manual was set aside to display his achievements. Sammy was a true cowboy, and like a Zane Grey hero, he rode off quietly into the sunset, back to his ranch in Rotan, Texas.
I love the country. I love the country life. I like horses. I like to fool those cattle, but I love a horse. And this is home to me. We've lived here since 1941, and it's a little far out in the country from any large town, of course, but we've got some small towns within 20 miles of us, so that's not so bad. I would never be happy in a big city. I don't care if they'd give me the whole damn city, I wouldn't like it if I had to live there all my life. When I was in school at TCU, I was flying to Washington to sign a contract, and Mr. Marshall told me to wear a cowboy hat and boots and have a little western flair there. And I did, but at that time I didn't wear boots, I didn't wear a cowboy hat at that time.
Sammy Baugh, as opposed to the way quarterbacks live this day and age, my first year I lived in a condemned hotel in Washington because the rent was free. Of course, Sam saved enough to buy a large cattle ranch, so the old story was Sam used to come to camp every year with a new pair of jeans and a $5 bill in his pocket, never changed either one.
I think the first championship game I ever played in, my first year, I think it was the thing that meant the most to me, because I never thought I'd ever play in a championship game in the Pro League, I'll just be honest with you. And I'll tell you, I never saw a bunch of boys that were cut up as much as everybody on both teams playing that ball game. That was a terrible field to have to play on, because every time you hit the ground, that frozen mud would just cut you, and you had little places bleeding all over you. It was a very poor field to play a football game on.
He had a charisma to attract fans. I remember in Philadelphia at Shibe Park that when we played, and Sammy Baugh was playing in those days, when we played the Redskins, that we turned down out on Lehigh Avenue in front of Shibe, we turned down 15,000 people at the gate, couldn't get in. He was an attraction.
Defending Sammy Baugh was almost an impossible situation. People that saw him play, I'm sure, will agree with me on that, because he threw the ball from a running position many times as he took the ball from center, short and long, in a hurry, or faking into the people, flaring out and going deep, and it made the defense a very tough situation.
A boy was rushing me, and he was a good football player. That's what he was supposed to be doing, but he was hitting me with his fist, and as though he was hitting at the ball, he was coming down, and he was always catching me right in the face, and I didn't. At that time, we didn't have any mask on or anything, you know. I told him next time we'd call a pass, that I told him not block him, just let him come, and I threw the ball and hit him right there on where that headgear went across his forehead, and I guess it shut off the blood or something, and anyway, he stood there a minute and just fell flat on his. I thought I'd killed him. It scared me more than did him. But it didn't help a bit, because he still came just as hard next time as he did before.
Bring in Sammy Baugh, though 36 years old and with 15 seasons of pro competition behind him, gives no signs of nearing the end of his amazing career. Voted the greatest living quarterback of all time by the Associated Press poll, the venerable Sammy is ready for another full season. Every time he throws the football, completes a pass, gains a yard, scores a touchdown, Baugh sets a world record.
A lot of people, they think of Sammy Baugh as being a great passer because of his records, and probably still has some, but he also was one of the greatest defensive backs in the National Football League. I think he led the league in pass interceptions a couple of years. A pretty fair ball carrier, the greatest quick kicker that ever lived.
Everybody today, I think, the quarterbacks of today, they do nothing but emulate the throwing styles that Sammy Baugh started years and years ago. I think that Sammy Baugh was the greatest football player that ever played the game.
From his childhood in Northern California to his 14 years with the Baltimore Colts, there seemed to be an extra dimension to the way Gino Marchetti lived and played. On his 18th birthday, he quit school and enlisted in the Army, and during World War II, he was decorated for bravery while fighting with the 69th Infantry. As a defensive end in the NFL, he was chosen for the Pro Bowl 10 times, and his fierce battles with offensive tackles were as much a part of watching the Colts as seeing Unitas, Lenny Moore, and Raymond Berry. Gino Marchetti is one of those rare men of a long past era who, with courage and daring, built the traditions and set the standards that have made the NFL what it is today.
If I could pick a player out of the past and bring him back, I'd pick Gino Marchetti in a hurry, because the way that Gastineau plays, the way that Howie Long plays, Gino did it a long time ago.
Gino Marchetti, number 89, created modern defensive end play. He used finesse rather than force, avoiding blockers instead of punishing them.
People used to line up and play against Gino when he was a defensive end, and they would end up not getting hit or not getting their uniform dirty. But the quarterback always had a dirty uniform on the other team.
Marchetti's primary job was rushing the passer, but he was just as tough on runners, crushing plays inside of him and slicing through plays wide of him. Marchetti played with a brooding intensity, and the flames of his competitive fire were ignited long before kickoff.
I was a nervous wreck, I know that. I remember I roomed with the doctor one time because I had a fever the night before the game. And he had said, you know, Gino, I'll give you 5 more years if, you know, I'll make you room in a telephone booth, you know, so you can calm down.
If you've ever seen a caged lion at the zoo where they're just pacing back and forth, that's what I remember about Gino. And we opened the cage and let him out.
God, I loved it. And when I ran on that field, I felt I was in heaven. When I heard that Baltimore Colts song, I just said, well, boy, this is it. I'm the luckiest guy in the world.
Not so lucky were Marchetti's opponents. Gino was at his best against the finest offensive linemen of his time. For Baltimore's irresistible force, there was no such thing as an immovable object.
If you were an offensive lineman and had to look forward to playing him the next day, I don't think you could put your head on the pillow the night before and ever fall into the land and nod, because you would know what was facing you the next afternoon, and Marchetti was a unbelievable load.
He's the only man that ever played that I couldn't block. I tried with, I was thinking if the coach ever traded me and I had to play against him, I wanted to know how to block him because I knew that he would be on my side. And I said, now this man I can't block, I don't know what to deal with. He's so quick off the ball. He beat the ball off the ball and they would never call him offside.
My brother, who played offensive guard for the Colts, gave me the tip. He said, don't ever let Gino get his hands on you, because he had such strong hands. If he's able to get a hold of your jersey, you're gone. You're dead if he grabs you.
We had a tackle named Frank Uso, and he's blocking on Gino, and he, before the game, had put Vaseline all over his shoulders, so that when Gino would go up and hit his shoulders, he would slide off. Well, he put them on this particular day, and the first couple of times Gino comes in, I hear him grunting, and he didn't get to me. I was surprised. Third time I went back to pass, I hear this, threw the ball down the field, and I hear this awful commotion. And Gino had taken Uso by the jersey and ripped his jersey completely off of him. He said, kid, when you come back in here the next time, don't put any grease on your jersey.
In a sport where bravery is a requisite, Captain Marchetti brought a special kind of valor.
We were playing Green Bay and Milwaukee, and I think it was just before the half. Ferguson, I made a tackle on Ferguson, and he tore my shoulder out. So they took me into a hospital room in there, emergency room.
And as they worked on it, the pain was intense, and to keep him from grinding off his teeth, they took a hard piece of rubber and placed it between his teeth. And as they were forcing this shoulder back in this intense pain that he was having to endure, he said, do you think I'll be able to play the second half?
White men call it heart. Black men call it soul. Spaniards call it machismo. Whatever you want to call it, Gino Marchetti had it. It was with him every Sunday for 14 years on the playing fields of the NFL.
Give me a bunch of Gino Marchettis. I'll go to war with anybody.
Terry Bradshaw might have leaped full-blown from the imagination of Mark Twain. He was a Louisiana country boy who seemed so naive that at first teammates and fans wrote him off as a dummy. But this Bayou Bumpkin went on to win twice as many Super Bowls as any other quarterback.
Throw it 80 yards, I could knock tacklers off, and I could outrun linebackers, and had a head full of blonde hair and muscles, and plus I read my Bible and said yes sir, no ma'am, and I was a polite youngster. So I didn't know any better. That's just the way I was raised, and then in the National Football League just wasn't ready for this guy, this Ozark Ike from this little college.
If raw natural ability was all it took, then the transition from the bayous of Louisiana to the Badlands of the NFL would have been easy for Terry Bradshaw. Pro football's #1 draft choice in 1970 was thought to be the savior of the Pittsburgh Steelers. But when the raw-boned rookie made bonehead mistakes, he was labeled a hayseed, who could find a needle in a haystack before he could discover a defense.
My first 2 or 3 years here, Terry was terrible. Terry would give the ball away. Terry would throw the ball in the stands. Terry would call the wrong play. Terry would jump off sides. How does a quarterback jump off sides? And that's a good one, right? But Terry could pull that off. Terry accounted for some big defensive tape film reels. Played a lot of defense. Played a whole lot of defense.
When I was not an overnight success, and we didn't win, and I was struggling with the football team, people couldn't understand why, because physically I looked like I should be awesome. Finally it just came out, hey, this guy's not too sharp, he's not too smart. He got benched, so he's stupid, he's not very smart. And then they would talk to players, and did he stutter in the huddle? Yeah, he stuttered in the huddle. Well, this backs it up, and he threw interceptions throwing across the field. Oh, this is dumb to do, and before you know it, I'm dumb.
Everybody could come on, he's a dumb quarterback. He did this, he did that. The dumbness, I think, is a lot of talent, because he may make dumb decisions, but he has so much ability, such a rocket arm, that he feels that he can squeeze that ball in that little crack.
Unbridled, playing it free and easy, Bradshaw was at his best. But in the early years, head coach Chuck Noll pulled hard on the reins.
Terry has a lot of raw talents where he can improvise a lot, but Chuck says, no, we're going to do it this way, do it this way.
Terry wanted to do things his way, and Chuck wanted, if Chuck is saying it's my team, I'm going to do it my way.
To be honest with you, I don't think Chuck handled Terry right. Took a lot of frustrations out on Terry. He'd yell at him when he'd come to the sidelines. He would yell at him in meetings.
I couldn't stand him. He used to grab me on the sideline, jerk me up and down, and put me in a game, pull me out, cuss me out on the sidelines in front of all the players. By him doing all this, they naturally had no respect for me.
Terry really needed to be patted on the rear, slapped on the back.
Finally went to him and said, look, if you'll pat me on my butt just one time, I'll kill for you. That's all you got to do. So for 5 years there, I don't think he enhanced my game at all. He tore me down so much that I had to fight to overcome all that.
Finally, Bradshaw turned winters of discontent into seasons of fulfillment. He began to sidestep critics as easily as he stepped out of tackles, and helped shape the Steelers into a dynasty in the 1970s. He was the best bad weather quarterback of all time, and the most feared in foul weather or fair.
I hated playing against Terry Bradshaw more than any quarterback in the league. I thought he was capable of greater things as a quarterback than any quarterback playing.
He'd go back to pass the football and drop the damn thing and bounce it right back up in his hands and never miss a step. You know, just a phenomenal athlete that can be running to his left and throw to the right just like he was standing still.
I always had great respect for Terry Bradshaw. I think he was a kind of a wild, uncontrollable quarterback, and I think when the Steelers realized that and let him go, then they won their 4 Super Bowls.
When the game was on the line, I just dearly just loved it. I just felt so comfortable, and the challenge just excited me so that I was beside myself, and yet I was always seemed to be under control. Nothing ever bothered me. I just loved the big game.
Bradshaw pumping, firing downfield. There goes Stallworth. He pulls it in at the 30, the 20. Touchdown, Pittsburgh. Listen to this.
4 Super Bowl victories vindicated Terry Bradshaw. No longer the dummy, the little Abner in cleats. He was a champion, and arguably the best quarterback ever.
When someday in the distant future, an old man tries to explain to a small boy the greatness of Gale Sayers, he'll have a hard time translating Sayers' unique skill into words. For 6 years, Sayers mixed magic into the general despair of Chicago autumns. Although the Bears had only 2 winning seasons during his career, Sayers became the youngest player ever to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. Vince Lombardi once said, "He took you by surprise even when you knew he was coming." And believe me, there is no single reel of football film as thrilling as seeing Gale Sayers with the ball in the open field.
Gale Sayers, number 40, exploded into the NFL in 1965. By the end of that season, he had scored 22 touchdowns, more than any player in the history of the NFL. For 5 years, Sayers' legs continued to pump. He led the league in rushing twice, set an NFL record for kickoff returns, and once scored an incredible 6 touchdowns in a single game.
He's the only guy I think that could be running, stop on a dime, tell you whether it's head to tail, and not even break stride.
What we remember about Gale Sayers are not certain games or plays. We remember the moves. Each one an original, never seen before, never seen again.
I've watched him put moves on guys coming up behind him, 4 yards away. No back has ever been able to do that.
I had great peripheral vision. There's no doubt about that. I could see everybody on the field. And so I knew where to run, where to cut. In the same way, I had a feel for where people were, because I know many times, many runs, I want to look at films, and there'd be a fellow coming from a blind side, and no way I could see him, but I could feel him.
And he gave me a fake like this here, and my body went one way, my mind went the other way, and something happens to your motor when that happens. It's hard to explain, but my legs went limp, and I had nothing left. But the only problem he made was he went one too many fakes and came right back into me, and I hit him and knocked him down. He said, "Nice tackle, Floyd." And I want to say, I couldn't even tackle if I wanted to. You ran into me.
Gale planted the foot and went through these people, and I thought I saw him an amoeba-like, or paramecium, split into two things, and the defensive people went at the wrong one.
Sayers' style, while beautiful, was deadly. In 1968, the dangers he so deftly sidestepped caught up to him.
They say that once you get a knee injury, you should think about quitting, because a running back very rarely comes back from the type of knee injury that I had. But quitting, I wanted to prove that one could come back from a serious knee injury within a year. They say so many times, well, it takes 2 years, it takes 3 years to come back. I wanted to prove that you could come back, and as I said, I had one of the worst knee injuries ever.
The next year, I think Gale Sayers came up with maybe the best performance of his entire life. He got his 1,000 yards rushing, and the longest run he made from scrimmage that whole year was 28 yards. But he was determined to get that 1,000 yards, to do that job, and instead of being able to run around everybody, he just had to do it the hard way, inside in. And he did it.
While Sayers' courage carried him to the rushing title in 1969, it was his instinctive skill that lifted him to a pedestal from which he will never fall.
I proudly present for induction into the Hall of Fame Gale Sayers. His like will never be seen again.
Gale Sayers' NFL career consisted of only 68 games. But in the eternal autumn of football memories, he remains undiminished, forever vibrant and free. A comet sighted by all who study the firmament of football.
I hope you've enjoyed our profiles in greatness. These 8 pro football players, just like great politicians, generals, and artists, have shaped our sense of ourselves and, in a special way, have reaffirmed our faith in what the individual can do. Their mastery and devotion to the game has made them heroes to all ages for all time.